back, and so is James Van Riemsdyk. You're listening to You Would Think, the Philadelphia Flyers podcast. I'm your host, Kyle Collington. Kevin, how are you today?
I'm doing as well as I can be.
Are you? Did you get your number 25 jersey out of the closet? You got it all nice and clean for the game? You wearing the JVR jersey? Come on.
I don't remember the last time I wore a jersey to anything.
Yeah, I forgot. Actually, you don't go to games as a fan anymore.
Actually I do, because I did go to one game as a fan this year, not in Philadelphia, obviously.
There's no way you wore a Flyers jersey to that game. There's no way you were that guy.
I did not. Absolutely not. No.
Okay.
But still, it was,
just because the Ducks wear orange doesn't mean you get to wear a Flyers jersey and fit in.
No.
All right.
Apparently there I fit in more than I thought, because I had hopes for that team this year, and they're at the bottom too. So apparently it must be me. I go to a team's game and you're lousy, apparently.
Right. All right, Kevin. We talked on last week's show about who would still be on the roster today. Patrick Brown is gone for a 6th round pick.
Yep.
Zach McEwen is gone for a 5th round pick in Brendan Lemieux. We'll get into that a little bit more later. The biggest story today is who is still here, and that would be James Van Riemsdyk.
Is that the biggest story of the guy who's still here? Or is it?
Yeah, absolutely.
No. Okay, well,
in terms of the roster.
Yes, I was going to say, you're saying in terms of players, and I get where you're coming from, so don't, I'm just playing around, but...
Chuck Fletcher apparently apparently almost traded JVR, approaching the trade deadline on Friday, but ultimately failed to.
Mm-hmm.
As we sit here on Sunday morning, Kevin, what's this franchise doing? And I feel like I start every show like this, but what? What's going on? Please help me.
Well, at this point, what else is really left to be said? Because, I know that, I personally have, and we on this show have kind of been a broken record for over a year. I mean, we've really had the same conversation multiple times.
For 18 months at this point.
Right, multiple times over. I'm trying to figure out where we really want to start the timeline here with all of this, because it's really been an interesting week. Because, from the time that we did the last show, which to our benefit, we didn't record until later on Sunday last week, right, where we certainly didn't miss a lot of stuff because of it. If we would have recorded in the morning like we typically do, then we would have missed kind of this bevy of trades that came along on Sunday. It was a very active Sunday. The whole week was. And for the record, so in a bigger picture, this has been the best trade deadline that I can remember. At very minimum of the cap era, we saw teams getting creative. We saw massive stars moved. We saw monstrous trades for just days and days and days and weeks leading up to the deadline. It was amazing entertainment. I saw a handful of tweets from people who cover the game and in general, kind of on a national level, kind of just people, that kind of were joking. Do NHL executives know something that we don't know? Like is the world going to end after this year? Like, this is it?
Everyone's gunning for this one cup.
Right, you better win the cup this year or you're never winning it, because the world's coming to an end.
If you look at the Eastern Conference, it certainly seems that way.
Right, with the Eastern Conference, the part that blows my mind is there are 6 genuinely elite teams in the East. And I'll give credit, because some of the Western Conference teams had good weeks this week.
Sure.
That kind of brought them back into conversation. Dallas looked great on Saturday afternoon, for what it's worth.
So I saw most of that game at work. They looked great.
Dallas looked great. Vegas is in a good position again. That kind of stuff. It's not straightforward, the top 6 in the league or the top 6 in the East. But
right. Well, Dallas is in there, but yes.
Oh, not anymore. But but still.
Out of the top 9, 7 of them are Eastern Conference teams.
6 of them I have right now, because it's Dallas.
Vegas. I'm sorry.
Yeah, Dallas, Vegas, and LA are the 3 Western Conference teams that really are kind of staking their name to being formidable out there.
Absolutely,
and that's totally fair. But yeah, that was kind of the joke, and I was on the station. Oh, goodness, I'm trying to remember exactly what day it was, because I did not go on, I guess Thursday, because if the deadline was Friday, the idea was I was on Thursday. There was 24 hours to go. And the story kind of was well, if anything happens, I would go back on Friday. And
then you didn't have to go back on Friday.
I didn't actually. You're right, because ultimately, when the story was okay, they traded McEwen, cool, that was it. Like
nobody cared.
Right?
Everyone knew he was. Well, we assumed he was going. We assumed he was going for about a 5th round pick. Brendan Lemieux coming back.
What else needed to be said? And in fairness, I think that I hope certainly that I kind of at that time captured where I thought things kind of were, which was this is a possibility. The spots are drying up. Like the supposed land. I'm not talking about whether guys called or not or offers were on the table. I'm talking about teams that you knew probably could use another forward that would be suitable fits for him. Well, they were doing other things. Minnesota was making other trades. Dallas was making other trades. Vegas was making other trades. And you started to realize that the teams out there that could pull this off, that could pull off the money, that could pull off the fit, were deciding on other options. The spots were drying up.
Can I read you a quote?
Sure.
So this is Chuck Fletcher at his press conference media availability. Talking about JVR and potential landing spots for him.
Okay.
Quote, we certainly made everybody aware he was available. We made everybody aware we would retain 50%. We made everyone aware that we would take back a contract if that helped a little bit on the cap or the cash. We talked about a different range, different ways of getting there, prospects, a pick, multiple picks, whatever it would be, conditional pick. We talked about all kinds of different scenarios. But ultimately, again, I can only control my half, and there has to be a willing buyer. And until 140 today, we never had any type of offer, and the offer we got was conditional. Chuck, listen. I'm going to speak directly to you here. If you're not Chuck Fletcher, Chuck, do your job. Do your job. Like, you had one job this trade deadline. Yeah, Zach McEwen, whatever, Patrick Brown, whatever, Nick Sealer, Justin Braun, whoever might have gone. You had one real job, and it's to get some sort of medium-ish asset for JVR. He was your only trade chip.
Here's the thing. I'm not trying to sit here and say that he necessarily did his job, because obviously, like, this happened. But here's the thing.
There was a failure at some point.
Yeah, the failure was in the failure goes back to the contract. The failure was in, let's put it this way. I don't know what you could have gotten for him if you do pull the trigger last offseason. I know that they were like, look, I know you don't want to throw your 1st round pick last year into that mix.
No, absolutely
to do it. So I get why you back off there. But what if that was the best value you were going to get at that time? You know what I mean? Like to me, if your response to the media, which I'll include this in what you're talking about, because he even said they couldn't even get a firm offer for a 4th for him. Well, if that's what you're not getting, then people are telling you around the league exactly what they think your players are worth. That's what it is. So
the front offices around the league do not respect Chuck Fletcher.
So
they can't.
All right.
They can't. How can they?
All right.
He's gotten fleeced in every deal he's made.
We got to go backwards then. We got to go backwards because you're on Friday afternoon at this point, and I got to go backwards.
Oh, I'm on giving up 3 picks for 77. But
no.
whatever. He's gotten fleeced in every trade he's ever made.
That one's beside the point because I'm not going back that far. I'm talking.
Let's not talk about Rasmus Ristolainen.
I will be in a second because I'm talking. Because here's the thing. I'm in the middle of the week right now.
Okay.
We did our show on Sunday. Everything's out there on Monday. Some trades are still happening. And I'm going to get into what happened on Monday a little later on because John Tortorella was the one who spoke on Monday and really laid out a lot of good things, good things in terms of reality. He really speaks from honesty and reality.
He's the face of the franchise, and we love John Tortorella right now.
Well, he really speaks from reality and honesty for the most part. Right. I'll get to that later.
Fair enough.
But he laid it out again, and again, I'm going to get into his comments later. But Chuck Fletcher, there are no words that you need to, or not need. There are no words at this point that are worse for me to see than Chuck Fletcher speaking today. Okay. Because once you put that out there once it's out there on Twitter that this is happening today, you already know what kind of day you're in for on the social media space, right?
Yep.
It's going to be one of those days. So Chuck Fletcher's going to speak on Tuesday. Okay, great. This was the first time that he had spoken to the media in almost 3 months. And I will admit This particular time was not as bad as the last time he spoke in terms of quite literally contradicting the head coach within an hour.
Right. Well, and that was the famous we're only 5 points out of a play or
Right.
6 points out of a playoff
So
spot.
it wasn't that level of bad, but it wasn't good, obviously. Instead, this is okay. So here's where the Tortorella Monday thing comes in. So this is one day after John Tortorella says for who knows how many times now that it's going to be a process. It's going to take time. They're building all of that. The one thing I can appreciate about John Tortorella this entire season is that I don't think I had heard him say the word playoffs until Monday when he firmly said the team's not making the playoffs.
Right.
He has not tried to sell you playoffs once this season. And the first time he even says the word is we're not making the playoffs and we know it. So all we can do as a team is play for pride. And this is where we are as a franchise.
We're figuring out who's going to be here next year.
Like, and the kind of the reason I bring that up, by the way, is because how many years, and I'm not trying to dig in, this is way past the point at this point. I'm not trying to dig on Claude Giroux here, but how many times as a captain would he come out and tell you, we intend to make the playoffs still, and they were 7 points out, having to climb out of that hole. And then they don't make it potentially. Stop trying to make promises that your team can't keep for talent level. Tortorella didn't say it until it's just too late.
Quite frankly, they haven't really had a player this year who's been as good as Claude Giroux.
No, I get it.
Claude's
you know
defense.
What I mean. But you know what I mean. Like, the team around Claude Giroux was usually never good enough to get out of those holes, and he was going to tell you
unless he was strapping the team to his back and not getting nominated for the Hart Trophy somehow.
Well,
whatever.
What? Sometimes it's like a batting average.
I'm not salty about that.
No, it's like a batting average because there were years he said it and they did climb out of the hole and make it, and he was a big part of that. So like 300 or 400, if you're 30 or 40% with you know what? I know we're in a hole and we had a slow start, but we're going to make the playoffs. And you do make it a couple times or a few, 3-4 times. Yeah, you know what? Maybe you're going to keep trying to go to that well because you think that there's a possibility. But anyway, now let's go back to Chuck Fletcher.
Yeah.
Who also finally admitted that the team would be selling, admitted that the team is in a process, and that, that comes far too late at this point, obviously. At that particular time, you had 72 hours, roughly, until the trade deadline. And that's when you finally admit, yes, we are selling.
Right. Whereas the fans have known since mid-November.
I'm not even worried about the fans. This is after plenty of teams that have realized that fate sooner have already started making the trades and moving players of value and doing all of that work. So I wrote about Chuck Fletcher's comments on that day, on Tuesday, later on. But in the moment, went on Twitter and kind of parsed a few lines that came out of this availability. Right. Let's start with the straight up, we're selling line. It took you way too long to get there.
Absolutely.
The head coach knew it weeks ago and was the only one in the franchise that could express that this is where the franchise was. So getting, that's too late. The line about we're getting more calls on expiring contracts. Well, that already told you what I tried to explain last week on the show. That if you thought they were going to move Kevin Hayes or Ivan Provorov or Travis Sanheim
it was unlikely.
With money and term at this deadline or anybody like that, it wasn't going to happen. There wasn't a chance in hell that any of those guys were going at this particular time of year. That always was more, you can lay some groundwork here, but that's always off-season. That's always off-season stuff.
Quite frankly, I'm grateful because if we're shaking up players with multiple years left and the core of this team, I don't want Chuck Fletcher doing it, quite frankly.
That's a fair thought. But my point being, look, if that's a lay the groundwork kind of thing, because let's go back to your line from Friday, the line that you read off.
Okay.
He's trying. He did his half in having something. No. Other teams have got to be able to fit those contracts if you're going to do it. That nobody can fit $3.5 million or whatever you would have gotten if you cut Kevin Hayes' salary in half. Let's just say no one's fitting that. No one's fitting $6.5 million for Ivan Provorov or 6.25 for I know it's 6.75 for Provorov or 6.25 for Sanheim. You know what I mean? No one's fitting that right now in full at this time. Now you want to call somebody in the offseason and say, hey, I can give you Ivan Provorov, a top 4 defenseman, for the next 3 years at $6.75 million, instead of you going out and trying to sign that top guy that's out there for $9 million, somebody probably is listening. That's fair.
Yeah.
That's fair. But it's not happening at the trade deadline. Okay, quote, we're not looking to take shortcuts. Then please explain to me what the last couple of off seasons were with the aggressive retool and the Band-Aid approach and all of
what is your defense right now? Half of your defense is guys that you panic acquired.
Pretty much. So you're not looking to take shortcuts?
Because
really?
Ryan Ellis took a giant dump the second you traded for him, and he was already hurt.
Yeah, so, we're not looking to take shortcuts? Not true. We all understand where we're at. Do you? Because only the coach has spoken in these terms up until this particular week with processes and building and all of that stuff. No one's talked like that around the organization. Nobody hears from anybody else, so it's pretty much what John Tortorella says and whatever Chuck Fletcher says whenever he comes out of hiding after 3 months. So what's the consistent message there? And then lastly, we need more high-end talent.
Clearly.
This is an evergreen comment.
Yeah.
We've heard that line for 18 months. And newsflash, there isn't a single player in the organization right now that is a surefire high-end talent. Cutter Gauthier could be.
Okay, you're talking about prospects. Okay.
No, but I'm talking in general. There's not a single player on the roster.
I'm willing to still keep Carter Hart in that territory.
Okay, can I clarify on something in this?
Sure.
I don't think that whenever they talk about high-end talent, they're talking about goaltending anymore. Because goaltending is the
fair.
Because goaltending is one. Because goaltending, it's one job and one job only.
Yeah.
Stop the puck. Now, you can be a high-end talent who stops the puck and steals games. Don't get me wrong. But I think when we hear this, we don't have enough high-end talent. We need more high-end talent. What you mean by when you're saying that is we don't have a goal scorer. We don't have a playmaker. We don't have a playmaker. We don't have a number one defenseman.
But just in terms of pure high-end talent, I do put Carter Hart there. But I certainly understand clarifying to mean like offensive production and actually helping out
right
in the field of play.
And that's why I pull that's why I say surefire.
That's fair.
Because Cutter Gauthier is having a great freshman year at Boston College. He could be that high-end talent that they need. But it's too soon to tell, especially once you get to the pro level. Let's see what happens. I'm not willing to guarantee that, they've got one chip.
Well, right. And then there's, for example, a guy like Elliot Desnoyers, who did make his NHL debut. We should touch on that here.
Yeah.
But he's a guy who was picked a little bit later. Second round, correct?
No, fifth.
No, he was the fifth round. Right. I'm sorry. And he's a guy who, you never know. Good teams develop players like that well and hit on them on occasion. Now, because it's the Philadelphia Flyers, he'll be out of the league by 2025. Sorry, Elliot. But if he sticks, he has shown flashes of the potential of maybe. But that's not enough. That's not. We need surefire, like you said. No,
but Elliot Desnoyers, a player like that, first of all, the ceiling is never high enough for high-end talent. Let's be clear about that.
Never, ever.
If you're drafting
even a guy like Cam York.
I hear where you're going from.
Okay.
Yeah. But there's a difference. Like the reason why I kind of made a face when you said that is not that I think that Cam York is necessarily a high-end talent, like top pair guy.
Top four. Top four.
No, but that's not where I'm going with that. It's
right.
That's still a first-round pick. So when you make first-round picks, you have higher expectations.
Sure.
A fifth-round pick, you're hoping to strike on somebody. Like, okay, you could get
it's a lottery ticket.
Right, but okay, if I'm not mistaken, and I'm not going to bother to look this up for one quick mention here, but I'm taking a shot that I remember this correctly. I think Andre Palat was like a 7th-round pick.
Yes.
Okay. Sometimes you get a 7th-round pick who has some good scoring ability and turns out to be a fit. And Andre Palat was realistically, among that grouping of Tampa players, realistically never a top line guy. He may have played up there on occasion to create some level of balance, but he was more top 6 or turned into it. And sometimes you hit on a pick like that. And sometimes your guy who is picked in the 6th or 7th round is more along the lines of, I don't know, more along the lines of a Casey Zizekas type, who is a very suitable bottom 6 player who has a role, plays it well, gives you a little bit more than the average third, fourth line guy. And maybe that's what works out. Elliot Desnoyers could be one of those players, or he could be Tyrell Goulbourne.
Who had a minute? I liked Tyrell Goulbourne for 2 weeks.
But hold on. But that's why I picked him, because he could be a guy who has a couple minutes at the NHL, or he could be a guy who has a good NHL career. He really could. There's no, you accept the good NHL careers from guys who you pick in the 5th round. If you can get 5, 6, 7 solid years out of one of those guys, you accept it.
Yeah.
Let's put it this way. A guy like, okay, what if Elliot Desnoyers, and there's a little bit of, not completely, but like let's say there's there's a little bit of similarity here potentially. What if Elliot Desnoyers' career turns out to be like Pierre-Edouard Bellemar's? Would you take that?
Yeah.
For a guy who you drafted in the 5th round, for a guy who isn't going to have that level of a role, but certainly is a suitable player?
On a good team. That's the thing, though.
Sure. But
if Pierre-Edouard Bellemare, if he's in your top 9, but if he's on your 4th line, you feel great about it.
But back in the day, he was, and then he goes to Tampa, and he really is on the 4th line. And,
well, right,
and yes,
and then he looks great.
Sure.
And then, we all knew what Pierre-Edouard Bellemare was when he was here. We all knew that he was playing higher in the depth chart than he probably should be.
So let's get back on the rails with everything. Oh yeah,
I would like to direct you to. Okay, you hear a lot of talk this time of year about trade deadline winners and losers.
Sure.
And a lot of the focus is on who gets the best player, right? Did the Rangers win because they got Patrick Kane? Did the Bruins win because they improved on a team that's already a friggin' wagon? Etc.
Sure.
But for our purposes here on this show,
right,
the trade deadline winners are really the teams that did the selling thing right. Can I summarize the recent moves of the Arizona Coyotes for you? I'm not going to go in detail about all of them.
No, but I already know where you're going with this, because this is a callback to last week's show also, because you even flat out said on the show, I went back and I heard this for a second, that you thought that the Arizona Coyotes would get more for Dyson Mayo and Shane Gostisbehere. And we'll leave Chikrin out, because Chikrin we knew was going to.
But Chikrin's a stud, right?
We knew Chikrin was going to fetch a return, but
Dyson Mayo and Shane Gostisbehere.
Dyson Mayo and Shane Gostisbehere would fetch more than the Flyers got for Justin Braun and Nick Seeler, which is very true, because both of them are still on the roster.
Right, and for Dyson Mayo, they got a 5th round pick and also super valuable LTIR space in the form of the Shea Weber contract. Shea Weber, Arizona Coyotes legend. Getting traded from Vegas, so he's also a Vegas Golden Knights legend. Okay. They then facilitated some of the money in the Patrick Kane trade and picked up a 3rd round pick for their services.
For Gostisbehere, they got a 3rd from
Carolina. They got a 3rd round pick from Gostisbehere. I'm going to skip over Chikrin. We'll come back to that because that's the big one. They did also acquire Jacob Voracek's contract from Columbus and a 6th round pick for that. They picked up a 3rd round pick in exchange for Nick Bjugstad. They traded the Ritchie brothers for each other, Brett Ritchie and Connor Mackey for Nick Ritchie and Troy Stechter.
First time ever that 2 brothers were traded for each other, by the way.
I know,
which is a really
right?
cool tidbit.
And then the Jacob Chikrin deal, they get a 1st and 2 seconds.
There was a couple of
the Arizona Coyotes had a really nice little trade deadline. And if you look, Cap Friendly has team draft picks listed.
Mm-hmm.
It's stupid. They have 2 firsts this year. That Senators pick is conditional. They also have 4 3rd round picks, an extra 5th and an extra 6th. Next year, they have their own 1st round pick. They have 4 2nd rounders, 3 3rd rounders, and then an extra 4th and an extra 7th. In 2025, they have 4 seconds.
By the way, I would bet almost any amount of money that there is no chance in hell that Bill Armstrong is using 4 3rd round picks this draft.
Absolutely not. Nope.
2 of those are being packaged to get back into the 2nd round. I would be willing to bet anything that happens. You've already got the 2 first.
You package 2 of those in a second, you might be able to get back into the 1st round.
The only reason
Boston might do it.
The only
don't have
reason
any picks though.
The only reason I don't agree with that is because since they only have their own 2nd for this year,
that's fair.
Like 2024, they'll get back into the 1st with 4 2nd round picks.
Absolutely.
You can get back there, sure, and you can keep your own probably.
You can get a decent 1st for that.
Do you realize also though in kind of in the running of that? Okay, and I'm not we'll talk about this later on because we'll definitely get into more deadlines because I really want to stick to the Flyers stuff now to keep up with. But so they've got Ottawa's 1st this year now. Well, and I get it, it's because there's a condition on it, right?
Yeah, the Senators are good enough that condition's not going to get met. It's a top 3 protection, I believe.
Top 5.
Top 5.
And if the condition is met, then the pick becomes an unprotected 2024 first.
Right.
What was this one?
But Ottawa's good enough.
If Ottawa, there's another. The condition. That's a condition on the second rounder from the
Okay.
following year. Never mind. So forget that one for a second. Because my point is, what happens if Ottawa, who is currently not in the playoffs, by the way, what if they don't make it? I mean, look, they're trending in a very good direction right now, especially following the Chychrun deal and all that stuff. Like they've had 2 really good wins since that deadline deal. Like they're making noise here. Since getting Chychrun, they've won 2 games and they're in the race. But what if they're not? And that means that not only do you have wherever you pick, but you have a pick that's going to probably be like 15th.
Right. Well, and if you're Ottawa, we talk about it all the time with the Flyers, and we can use this to tie back into the Flyers. Picking 15th doesn't make your team better. Not really. Like it does. But
in Arizona.
You know what I mean? In a more abstract way. 2 years down the road, this, that, the other. You got to develop the guy. And if the lottery spikes and it's a top 5 pick, they keep it. And, next year they're going to be better anyway because they have Jacob Chychrun for a full season.
Right. Now, but this is where I'm going with
And Josh Norris back, probably.
So you've got Ottawa, who may not make, look, I think they're trending in the right direction, like I said, but they may not make the playoffs because they're in a battle right now.
Fair enough.
How about the 3 teams that they got picks from in 2024 right now? In the second round, I mean. Florida, Montreal, Washington. What do those 3 teams have in common this year?
They're all down or on the way down in the case of Washington.
I'll tell you what it is, because Washington's already kind of made their bed with this, with what they've done. In a good way, because they've kind of they're one of those teams.
Yeah, but they're also going to bounce right back and try to be good next year because you have to make.
They're going to try to be, but there's no guarantee. They're going to try to be, but there's no guarantees.
You're right.
And I don't know if Montreal or Florida is going to have the firepower, given what the rest of the Eastern Conference has been. Are you looking at a possibility that those 4 teams, like Arizona and the 3 teams they acquired picks from in the second round of next year's draft, are all going to be in the top 15 of the round?
Right.
Is that possible?
It's a possibility. I
don't know about all.
Don't
okay.
see Washington
I don't know about all 3
down there.
I don't know about all 3, but 2 out of the 3 are going to be there.
Right. Like Washington, I think a lot of Washington's issues this year have to do with John Carlson not being 100% and the OV issues.
It's John Carlson. It's every time Oshie scratched. Wilson didn't play for near half a quarter of the year. Backstrom couldn't play.
Like, this is their down year. I have a feeling they're going to bounce back really strong.
The only concern I have with that is that we're not talking about guys who were out for a long period of time that are young.
Oh, right. We're not talking about 26-year-olds.
Right. We're talking about guys who are on the back
in their
9
30s.
here. Yeah. And as good as Ovechkin has been, and as much as he's chasing down a record and all that stuff, it's not him by himself is not going to put them back into into much more than the wild card conversation.
If the Boston Bruins can get David Krejci to come back from Czechia, the Washington Capitals can get it up one more time for Ovi.
All right, back to Chuck Fletcher.
Back to the Philadelphia Flyers here. Isn't it so much more fun talking about good teams, Kevin?
We're gonna we're gonna have a great time in a few in how many weeks? About 5-6 weeks.
I can't, dude. I'm so excited for the playoffs. The Eastern Conference is ridiculous.
By the way, I was doing some post deadline work. I'll do a teaser here because I don't care. Yeah. I was doing some post deadline work, and I may be working on something for after the regular season's over. That's going to be good on the show. So I may be working on a little something. We're gonna have some fun. Because we like talking about good teams, right?
Absolutely. I'm so excited.
Fairly in recent weeks, by the way, we've talked about one team in particular a good amount because they happen to be the best team in the league this year.
Maybe the best team in history, legitimately.
There's your hint. Okay,
yep.
That's where I'm leaving it. There's your hint, and there might be something fun coming up. That's all I'm going to say. So anyway, back to Chuck Fletcher. So my interpretation of all of what was said on Tuesday was that, okay, listen, if you want to sit here and talk about mentioning that you're in a process and both coach and GM have now said that and all that stuff, that's all well and good. But this is not a trust the process movement because
Sam Hinkie for GM.
Because there was nothing really upfront about this. Like, if you go down this path and then are sticking to it for several years, then that's being upfront about. And being upfront about it would have also been
a lot of favor with the fans.
Well, being upfront about it is not 3 days before the trade deadline of another lost season. Hey, by the way, now we're in a process.
Hey, we're selling.
Right. Like, you could have come, like, honestly, you could have even done something like that and had a little bit more.
A month ago?
No, I would, no, it need to be earlier than that.
Okay.
But you could have come out after the offseason didn't go kind of according to plan. Like, okay, listen, we said aggressive retool. We tried. It didn't work out the way that we thought it was going to. Going into this season, we're really going to focus on being in this process now. Going into it, but they didn't even do that. So there's no upfront, and there's no reason to feel confident that Chuck Fletcher is capable of leading such a process.
Correct.
Then came deadline day itself. So the Flyers had a trade go down around noon. That's when the Zach McEwen trade happened. He goes to LA. The Flyers get Brendan Lemieux and a 2024 fifth-round pick. And I'm not even really dissecting these trades for what it's worth. Brent, like, you want a quick dissection of the trades?
Hey, we won't be the worst podcast in Philadelphia anymore.
If you want a quick dissection of the trades?
Okay.
Like
yeah.
Two sentences worth quick.
They're fine. Period.
Brendan Lemieux's on a 20-game tryout. That's fine. The fifth-round pick was about as good as you were going to do for Zach McEwen. That's fine. Okay, that's the end of that trade. For the next 3 hours, or roughly 3 hours, there really was nothing else until the final half hour before the deadline. And this is when things kind of get crazy. And I know you have
wonky.
You have some tweets prepared of kind of how it went down. So I'll let you kind of jump in whenever we get to that point. But
yeah.
So here's basically what happened. It appeared, because there were reports starting to surface, that James Van Riemsdyk was going to Detroit. He was off for Detroit.
Yep.
Pretty much all of the major guys tweeted it. I believe, what was it? Pierre LeBrun had something. Elliot Friedman had something.
Saravalli had something.
Saravalli had something. Drager had something. Like, everybody who you would think was who you would think.
The normal gang. Chris Johnson had something.
Well, no, not completely. Because
no, right.
Most of those guys chimed in with a different angle, which was like I don't think Saravalli ever reported that it was on. I think he just came in with the "it's not done."
You're right. Yeah.
He kind of countered it.
He was the one who came in with no trade in place at this exact moment in time for James Van Riemsdyk.
So,
and that was tweeted at 2:43.
Okay, now let's go back. So let's go back about 10 minutes before that, when the initial reports were coming out.
Yeah.
In all honesty, with the exception of knowing which team was going to definitively be involved in making such a trade, that was exactly how I expected it to play out. That it was going to be an 11th hour under the wire kind of deal for him. Very much, and I didn't write this in my notes or anything like that, but very much, remember when Wayne Simmons got traded a few years back and it literally came out 2 minutes after the deadline because it was that much down to the wire? I very much expected the same thing, that this was going to be a down to the wire kind of trade.
Absolutely.
And
and we did hear in this interim, that it was pending Detroit doing something else. That Detroit had to make something else happen, and apparently what ended up happening here is that trade fell through, so they backed out of the JVR trade.
Right, and I'll kind of we'll go into that in a second. So, okay, because then suddenly, and you just brought it up, it was about 10 minutes later, then the reports come out, nothing's done, this isn't final, the deal may be falling through, all of that. So, JVR does not get traded as a result of this, because there's 15 minutes left until the trade deadline. As all of this is going on, you're sitting there going, wait, it fell through and now you got 15 minutes left to pivot? It's not a lot of time. You got to go back, and now everybody knows.
When, with hindsight being what it is, when you didn't get any calls until 1:40 anyway.
Right. So JVR doesn't get traded as Justin Braun's name never came up. And in fairness, by the way, I pinned that John Tortorella as well, because for the longest time they didn't play the guy. If you're a bad team that's going to bench a guy who's a trade chip, then most teams are probably not calling you on that guy.
Oh, so right. If you can't make your team, why would we give you an asset for him to not make ours?
Well, the only reason it would have happened was track record, which is I think what everybody was hoping for, but whatever. And then at the wire, they sent Patrick Brown to Ottawa for the 6th round pick that they get, and that was it. Now, I don't need to spend the whole show talking about the incompetence that is the front office and that they've shown and replicated on trade deadline day. Well, that you're taking my notes right away from me here, because I've done it before And all that happens from here on out is a daily reminder that it still exists. So
and I'm sure we'll do it again.
Right. We don't need to do the whole show today doing what we've done before.
If Chuck Fletcher's still here on the first day of free agency, we'll be doing it again. Don't you worry.
Probably, but okay. Now, so naturally in the immediate, like the trade deadline passes, the stories, the reports start to surface. Yeah, JVR was not traded.
Yep.
Like we now know it to be completely 1,000% definitive.
And for the record, I like JVR as a person. I think he seems like a good guy. I respect and appreciate what he does on the ice. He is a solid player. None of this is, hey, we don't like you, get out of our town. This is, we need an asset back. We like you a lot. I'm sorry. Please go win a cup. It'd be great if you won. That'd be really cool. But really, the most important thing is we need an asset back for you.
Well, and listen, this is what happens with when it comes to this type of stuff with every trade that gets made at deadline time.
Business.
No, we saw this with Claude Giroux. This would have happened with anybody else who kind of gets moved around this time of year, especially if you're a really And guess what? It doesn't just happen to the player himself. It happens to his teammates too, where it's there's a realization. Things are going to start changing. You got to try to get it's worth listen, the guy deserves a shot to go play for somebody who's going to have a chance.
Absolutely.
So this is what ends up happening. And there, all that the fans here in Philadelphia did last year when it was apparent that Claude Giroux was coming up on that final
shower him with affection,
and he couldn't even keep it together.
No, he lost it.
He lost it multiple times. You could see it because he knew it was the end of it. But there comes a time when this happens, and it has nothing to do with whether or not you don't it has nothing to do with liking the guy.
Right.
Of course you like the guy. Everybody Claude Giroux got it shown for him in the most fitting way possible, and then 2 days later was out the door.
I do just feel bad for JVR though, because he wakes up he wakes up the next morning and everyone's mad that he didn't get traded, and
it's hardly his fault.
I promise it's not you, right? It's the fact that they didn't trade. No one's bummed that you're still here. They're bummed that we didn't get an asset for you. You know what I mean? We're bummed that the trade didn't happen, not that you are still here.
Right. And you're right. I know what you mean, but I know where you're trying to go from with that. It's not about the individual. It's about, what it was supposed to represent.
Exactly.
Look, we've watched as people who have gotten traded from this franchise go on to play for somebody who has a shot and want them to win.
Chemo, man.
Yep. Do we need more of an example than Chemo Timonen, who goes and wins and everybody's happy for the guy?
I can't watch that clip without tearing up.
Sure.
Oh, just Jonathan Taves. Come on, man. Yeah, we absolutely root for him to win once they're out of here. The reason I wanted Claude Giroux to go to the Colorado Avalanche last year is because I thought they were winning it all.
And they did.
Well, right. What did Claude think?
Either way.
I know.
But naturally there was a lot of disbelief that this could even happen. That they could have somebody who, based on a lot of things, you're talking about a player who has, I think I wrote this, this is a player who has nearly 300 career goals, has played in over 900 NHL games. That's a slam dunk trade chip for a team that's in the playoffs, and he doesn't have to be elite level, go to the, okay, right. I'm not trying to sit here and say this is what the Rangers were doing or the Devils getting Timo Meyer or something no, you're not getting a top 4 forward. You're not getting a guy.
You're not demanding a first, a second, and a prospect for him.
But you are getting a veteran presence and a guy who, okay, listen, has, it's kind of interesting because I believe, if I'm not mistaken, whose longest playoff run is still his rookie year, because obviously all the years in Toronto, he never made it out of the first round. Right. He was on the team when the Flyers were in the playoffs in 2020.
Yep.
But
lost in the second round.
Right, but that's still a second round exit, and that's about as far outside of that first year when they made it to the Cup final, and he's a rookie, and he's scoring a goal in Game 7 against Boston.
Man,
all that.
He scored the first goal, didn't he? He triggered the comeback. Yeah.
He scored the first goal that. Oh, God, I wish I could remember which defenseman it was, but it broke the guy's stick.
And then just dribbled between Tim Thomas's legs.
It might have been Dennis Seidenberg. Honestly, it might have been.
Good.
But either way, beside the point. to have what appeared to be a slam dunk trade, and this is the really reason why I'm saying slam dunk also, is because for all of the trades that were made leading up to deadline day, when deadline day hit and all of those lists are out there of trade bait and
he was on top of all of them.
He's the top player on all of the lists.
All of them.
Everybody figured, okay, at some point in time, he's going today, right? Like, he's the most valuable player that's going to be out there at this point, because at this point, you can take everybody out. Even like Chikrin's been traded, Kane's been traded, Tarasenko was traded.
And instead, Boston prized Tyler Bertuzzi away from Detroit.
Yeah, really.
Literally, rather than come to Philadelphia and get a guy who the Flyers are attempting to get rid of.
Can you blame him? Did you see his first game on Saturday?
Oh, I know. But you went and you gave up multiple picks. Like, it's crazy.
Oh, because Boston doesn't care about the picks right now. They're going for it.
I know. Well, you
can't be worried about draft picks when you're where you are in a historic season and the vibes are immaculate.
Man, you're right. We talked about Arizona's dearth of picks. Boston. They have their 3rd and 4th this year. 3rd, 4, 6, and 2 7ths this year. 4, 5, 6 next year, 2024.
What team is? I think it's about no, and this is different, but still similar. Somebody said like Tampa's going, like the draft's in Nashville this year. Tampa's going apparently to go to the bars until the 6th round or something, because they have no picks until the 6th round.
Yeah, honestly, what we talked about, the East kind of gearing up. Yeah. Included a lot of teams that are firmly in their window, right? We've seen Pittsburgh expel assets to try to get better. We've seen
Toronto really did it.
Toronto, Buffalo, Boston, Detroit.
Do you know what's interesting, by the way, kind of in this? There are teams that are very clearly all in, like push
the
all
Rangers, the Devils.
Well,
not so much the Devils. The Rangers a little more so.
No, because here's the reason with the Devils. The Devils made a trade to acquire a player that they could very much re-sign, and by doing so, make themselves a future contender for a long time.
Because you still have Hughes and Hischier just locked up.
Toronto, good luck with Toronto. You're making a push with guys like O'Reilly and
they're pushing in a small window because their big guys only have 2 years left.
Kind of, right?
They're in Boston, a limited window.
And Boston's in the tail end of the Bergeron, Krejci, that era is going to end at some point very soon. And when it does, you need to show that you've gone all in for it, right?
Right.
But New Jersey, even Carolina doesn't do this. Carolina does not take crazy big risks. And I swear, just gets fits for Rod Brind'Amour. Just goes and gets players who are going to be a fit for Rod Brind'Amour.
And Shane Goss to spare.
But he scored in his first game. I wonder why.
On the power play, I know.
Right. I wonder why, because
it just feels like such a weird fit, though. It really does, because he feels like the mini-me to Brett Burns.
Kind of. That's kind of funny. But either way, all right, so let's go back. We're still on the we got to finish the Flyers.
Are we still on the Flyers? Okay.
Yeah. Because I haven't even gotten to the Friday presser.
Okay, fair enough.
So somehow they didn't find a way to move JVR. It's only furthered in Chuck Fletcher's post-deadline availability. He twice admits he hasn't done his job well enough, points the finger at himself, said he couldn't even get a 4th-round pick for JVR, which showed you just what the rest of the league thinks of what you had to offer.
Right. That's not due to lack of available talent or available picks there.
And it's not due to a lack of trying, because you can pick up the phone and call teams as much as you want to.
According to Chuck, he received 3 or 4 calls and made 17, I believe he said.
Right.
Chuck, make 20 next time.
Either way.
Call more.
And that was pretty much that. In a year where the trade deadline was very much the Flyers' playoffs, outside of when the draft lottery takes place,
they got swept in the first round,
which is very much your Super Bowl at this point. Like the draft lottery is your Super Bowl. This was the biggest day for them, and they flat out blew it.
Absolutely.
Okay, so
embarrassing.
So the dust. Now, okay, pull back the curtain time for me. So the dust settled. I went out for the night because as I told you before, first of all, when things like this happen, when we have events like a significant trade, a signing, reactions to a press conference, I kind of need to let everything marinate for a little before I go and give you an article, because I can't. Not only can I not really be reactionary to it, but
you just provide some analysis.
But you need time to think about it. You can't just jump in. It requires.
It's got to marinate.
let the thoughts marinate and get everything out into the open the way you want it to.
You watch any?
And
You watch any Letterkenny?
Not. I haven't watched a lot of anything lately. I actually sat down and was watching. I'll a show that I've been told. I know that a show that I've been told I really need to watch love that I actually did start watching last night. No joke. Ted Lasso.
Okay, fair enough.
Which is You
should watch Letterkenny. You will love Shoresy. Anyway.
I've seen have I seen clips? Yes. And during the season's not a good time for me to get on board with anything. Fair. That's the problem. So I'm hoping, and fully,
I'll convince you over the summer.
No, here's the thing. I think I fully elaborated that my off season last summer in between trying to figure out what they were doing was fully on busy and
hectic.
So I've got, maybe this summer I'll have some time to really sit down and binge watch some stuff. Anywho, so I was out on Friday night, and another reason for that, by the way, was, to be honest, it was the first time all week I felt like I could actually look away from my phone for a couple minutes.
Fair. It was insane.
So I was plenty happy to get away for a little bit. So I write my piece for Saturday morning, put it out there, and to an extent kind of repeated the message that I had when the free agency debacle happened, and that this, that takes this far beyond Chuck Fletcher. Told you on the show last week, and I said this is on the surface is going to sound kind of stupid in a way, but I don't think that Chuck Fletcher is the biggest issue that the Flyers have, because he is what he is. He makes deals how he knows how to make deals. He signs the contracts that he typically signs. That's how it's going to be. The bigger issue is going to be is whether you accept this and being in a position where, if you're supposed to be an advisor, if you're supposed to be part of an ownership group, are you supposed to, you're supposed to be doing what's good for the franchise for years to come. Are you going to accept that, or are you going to, do something about it? And there are always going to be missteps. Every franchise has a misstep somewhere.
Right.
But there are other franchises in the NHL today that they're like, beyond the Flyers, there are other franchises around the league today that feel like they don't have a sense of direction and that there's a challenge in front of them at this point.
Vancouver is probably the most notable.
Right. But this isn't Chuck Fletcher's second trade deadline, let's say, where missing the boat on something or making a mistake is something that you can kind of overlook and say, well, we'll provide another opportunity because it went the way it did this year. There wasn't much out there that he could sell, blah, blah.
No, he's been the general manager long enough that this roster is his fault.
This was his fifth trade deadline. 5 years of this level of incompetence. And when you look at how low this franchise is, what a mockery and laughing stock it has become, the blood is on multiple hands at this point. Chuck Fletcher, the general manager, is the one who is in the public eye. He is on the front line. I believe that the term that John Tortorella used on Saturday was that, chucking darts at is what he said. And fair enough. Yeah, when you're the guy who comes out and speaks in representation of the next level, when you're, the head coach can really kind of only speak on what he's got.
Right. He can speak about the room.
This is my team. This is our room. This is how it goes. Right. And can kind of because notice how Tortorella never goes much further than, yeah, I talked to Chuck, but all I can do is tell him what I think of what's in front of me, not what we should do.
John is doing his absolute best to behave, and I will give him credit for that.
Right. So Chuck Fletcher is on the front line, but you have figures in highly appointed positions who were part of building the very fabric that the Philadelphia Flyers that made them so reputable and that are now responsible for turning it into a mess. Bobby Clark is a senior advisor. Paul Holmgren is a senior advisor. Bill Barber is a senior advisor and essentially an assistant to Dave Scott. This is a group effort. And again, and I've said this all along, I respect what these people have done in establishing the history of the Flyers. Behind the very camera that I'm looking at right now are pictures on my wall. Multiple ones of Bobby Clark. Bill Barber's in pictures that are on this wall. I understand more than anything what they did to build what it is. But now this is now in their hands more than ever before, because if you can accept the job that Chuck Fletcher has done, if you can accept everything that the Philadelphia Flyers have become, then the franchise is quite possibly beyond saving at this point.
Maybe Eric Lindros was right. Maybe Bobby Clark is the problem. All those years ago, Bonnie and Carl Lindros, they were correct. Here's the thing. I've said it before. Again, I'm sure I'll say it again. Bobby Clark is a legend. Maybe the greatest captain this franchise has ever had. Definitely the most successful on the ice. Bob Clark needs to respect Bobby Clark's legacy and leave while he can.
I kind of like,
and I think it's too late at this point, frankly.
But okay, but like the level I compared it to, because it wasn't that long ago that, you know, and listen, I like, it's funny, we're coming back to this team again. We did it last week. We're coming back to this team again because they are the best team in the league right now. So I'm sitting there and I'm like, Saturday afternoon, I'm watching the Bruins game with a buddy because it was the Bruins. I mean, it's Bruins Rangers. Both teams just added. It's potential
showdown,
potential playoff matchup.
Potential Eastern Conference final.
So we're watching it, and I kind of described what's going on in the Flyers, not front office completely, but I kind of described it as, you know, okay, listen, your general manager in Boston, Don Sweeney, is a former player from the franchise, and not that Chuck Fletcher is, but that's beside the point. But your team, you know, your team president is not only a former player, but a legend in Boston Bruins history. Cam Neely is a legendary Bruins player. Has his name in the rafters, just like Bobby Clark does, just like Bill Barber does. Now imagine that in addition to having Cam Neely as part of like the presidential group, quite literally take the greatest player you ever had and have him part of the advisory group. So take Bobby Orr.
I was going to say, would that be Bobby Orr probably?
And say he's part of the advisory group. And now say that your franchise is in this state of disarray, and it's actually quite literally taking what Bobby, you know, and I understand the Bruins have been around a lot longer than the Flyers, but let's go from the 1967 kind of area here.
Sure.
Bobby Orr has a goal that is as legendary as it gets. Might be the greatest goal ever scored in the history of the NHL.
It's up there, for sure.
You know?
Probably the most famous.
It's one of the most famous pictures. I don't know if I don't know that you can tell in the background, but it is behind me up on this wall. It is on this wall.
Can't quite see it. But
no, you can't quite see it, but it is on this wall. Imagine if that player, who is the most legendary that you've ever had, is part of what is making it a laughingstock, is part of what is tearing down what was built up by him. You know, the very legacy of a franchise that was built, as much of a fabric as, you know, whatever. And imagine that those people tell, you know, basically as advisors are assuring your ownership group that everything is okay, that it's fine, that no, we trust in this guy, that he's capable of doing it. Just you wait and see. That you're part of ruining your own legacy that you built.
I can't.
But I take players like I'm taking players, and it's a group, because this is nothing against Bobby Clark, the player, as you said. This is nothing against Bill Barber, the player. This is nothing against Paul Holmgren, the player, who also went to Cup finals when he was playing. This is nothing against that.
No, nothing against their legacies on the ice. Absolutely not.
And this is not to say that they have crazy levels of involvement in day to day, but you're advisors. Then do your job and advise to an extent. And I know that you're semi-retired in advising, but to an extent, you're trusted voices in because of what you established as a franchise. You're as equally a part of the success and respect that the Philadelphia Flyers had as Ed Snyder himself is. You're the next tier down. You're the very much the next tier down.
Every time I hear somebody say, well, the Philadelphia Flyers have a brand, they're the Broad Street Bullies, I want to vomit in my mouth, because it is 2023.
Right.
And that has not been effective at minimum since the 2005 lockout. It just hasn't.
Sure.
And think about the greatest playoff success since that playoff run, or since that lockout, the 2010 Cup run. Mm-hmm. Built off, yes, the toughness of Chris Pronger and, you know, some of the rough and tumble, blah, blah, blah. Danny Briere, Mike Richards, the core of that team was skill. You know, young Claude Giroux, young James Van Riemsdyk.
It was skill, but it was edgy.
It was, sure, exactly. And if that's what your brand is, like the Boston Bruins. The Boston Bruins have a very similar history to the Philadelphia Flyers.
Sure, Big Bad Bruins.
And I think very similar expectations when it comes to roster management. And who did they go out and add at this deadline? They added Garnet Hathaway,
Tyler Bertuzzi, Dmitry Orlov.
Right. 3 players who are all awful, awful human beings on the ice. Human beings on the ice.
Right, like, oh, you hate play. Yeah, you hate
exactly.
Guys, absolutely.
Menaces, terrors. It's a team full of Brad Marchands. And that says it all.
But I can go down a long list because it's Marchand. Like,
But
it's guys like, but like Connor Clifton is a guy who gets scrappy. Like, guys like that'll do it. Trent Frederick is known to get scrappy. Like,
but the important part is that it's edge with the skill. The second Milan Lucic's hands fell apart, they shipped them. They have Brad Marchand. They have Charlie Coyle will grind on anybody in the league. Charlie McAvoy is downright dirty half the time. But we're talking about these guys who all play the same way. They all play with this grit, this edge, this sandpaper.
Yeah.
But they all have skill too. And that's the part that the Flyers haven't seemed to grasp over the last 20 years
right.
or so. Because Zach McEwen can shoot every puck on earth 3 feet wide. And he can be 4 feet in front of the net and still miss 2 feet wide. But he can punch somebody in the face. So he had a spot on this roster for, 3 years? At least 2.
I think it was just last year and this year.
Well, right, that's what I mean. So at some point, I don't know if the front office needs a carefully concise biopsy or if it just needs a full lobotomy minus Daniel Briere. But some surgery needs to get done. And there has to be some sort of shift to the future, some sort of shift to what could be.
I'd be genuinely concerned, like, because I hear where you're coming from with Danny Briere. I'd genuinely be concerned about his role in this too. Not that he has a clear-cut leading role right now, but too much is happening around him for me to kind of even feel like you can trust him at this point, because he's if this is supposed to be a learning experience and prepping him for the next step, he's learning from the wrong people then. So how you should be confident in his abilities, because like, it's just, I don't know. Like, I
think what I'm hoping from is for an angel from Comcast to come down on high, fire Dave Scott, fire kick Paul Holmgren, Bobby Clark, Bill Barber, everybody, Bernie Perrant,
it's not
everybody.
It's not Bernie though, because no, you want to walk around, shake hands, and kiss babies and all that stuff. Please be my guest. You're part of the history of the franchise. Just don't make any decisions around the team.
Come back in a year. Literally 1 year, no alumni, 0. Full new message. You need to.
I guess
it's a little. They're never going to do it just for PR purposes. People love meeting Bernie Perrant. People love meeting.
Now listen. Here's the
Dave
thing.
Schultz. I get it.
But I don't know how much that's been an opportunity, like, kind of in a way. Like, I don't know how much that's really like to an extent. I don't know how much that goes on. And look, those guys aren't getting, like, they're older now and stuff like that. So maybe some of that dissipates over time.
Right. And you're telling me they're not talking to Bob Clark. They're not talking to Paul Holmgren when they're in the building. And that's what I mean. It's not about them making the decisions. It's about the influence and the culture. And if you cut out the Holmgren and the Clark and Barber, like the guys who are actually influencing the team directly, then sure, maybe the alumni can stay around because there's that separation. That's fine. But when their buddies are the ones who are doing that, you can't.
Right.
You just have to clear it out.
I get what you're saying.
It doesn't even have to be analytics focused, because, like, I understand that's not everybody's thing, and there is the eye test, and the if you go full analytics, it doesn't often account for grit. I understand that.
Right.
But there has to be somebody who wants to make some decisions with analytics sometimes. And I feel like that's never the case.
So let me try to pick back up, because the next portion of this is then you have John Tortorella, who I think has done as good a job as anyone in trying to be a face of the franchise in a dark time, trying to discuss what needs to happen, saying you need to stick to this process, do it the right way, all of that, and has been essentially, saying this stuff and knowing it from day one. And then he came out less than 24 hours after the trade deadline passes and basically flat out gave the media an "Are you kidding me?" because of criticism towards Chuck Fletcher and thinking it's about not trading JVR. This isn't about not trading JVR. This is about the years of these scenarios that consistently play out with Chuck Fletcher as the general manager and the franchise avoiding the very process that Tortorella has said he wants them to stick to.
Yep.
Now, and look, I understand what Tortorella is doing and why he's the one doing it in that spot. He's trying to do damage control as the most trusted figure in the franchise right now, which is not false.
Absolutely
if
not.
you put him out there, he's the one who people trust the most when
Yep.
he speaks. And he's the one doing it because if the entire organization feels that the criticism is too harsh and wants to defend and protect Chuck Fletcher, which, like, again, it's the network thing. Chuck Fletcher's first ever job in hockey comes courtesy of Bobby Clark. All that type of stuff, right? And all that. If this is what they're trying to do, then they're definitely going to send out the guy who doesn't give a damn how it sounds and certainly isn't afraid to be brutally honest with anyone, especially the media. Yep. So that's why Tortorella did it. Because do you think he cares how he looks coming out of this? It's not going to be the first time he's had like a moment in front of the media where it's like, are you guys kidding me? He tried, and you're going to pile on to him and blah, blah, blah. Like,
right.
John
Tortorella bears no responsibility for the misfortunes and shortcomings of this team.
But he also doesn't give a damn how he's perceived.
No.
And that's the thing. So if anybody's going to, and he's blunt about it. So
which isn't a bad thing for the record.
But if anybody was going to come out and give you a state like this isn't your average head coach coming out and saying, listen, I stand by my general manager and doing it kind of in a nice way. This was going to be guys, seriously, with that little bit of tone and attitude to it. I can't stand that you guys put this stuff out there. It's not like you guys are piling on, blah, blah, blah.
Right.
Here's the thing. Sorry, it's not piling on when it's happened for years. It's not. He called it manufactured. Don't manufacture criticism, make it legitimate. It's not manufacturing criticism when this is years of a franchise's history at this point. It's very much legitimate because the criticism doesn't have to do with what you think the criticism is. It didn't have to do with whether or not Chuck Fletcher tried to trade JVR. It had to do with an entire package of events that, yes, did, as he kind of led, because he hinted at it, kind of does have to do with stuff that happened before you were here. Yep. This isn't about this year's deadline. This is not about, because I think at some point in time, I didn't listen to the whole press conference and I wasn't there. I wasn't there and all that stuff. I think he brought up the fact that not signing Gaudreau was his best non-move or whatever. Okay, guess what? Some people have said that. I've said that. I understood why they didn't do it, but that's not what this is about either. This doesn't go back to whether or not you signed a guy. It doesn't go back to whether or not you traded this guy. It goes back to you've had years to admit that you were in this process, and it took you, John Tortorella, to show up and continue to hammer the point home for this to even be for him to even say the words "we're selling," for him to even talk about it in terms of a rebuild without saying the word rebuild.
I think what tipped me absolutely over the edge on Chuck Fletcher was when it became known last year that Claude Giroux was not going to be offered a contract. Claude Giroux was not going to be welcomed back. And you still can't call it a rebuild, is the thing. If they had come out and said, hey, I'm sorry, Claude, we love you, but we're looking to get younger, we're looking to move into the future, I'm sorry we're not going to be signing you to a contract. Oh, I could understand that. I could respect that. But it was just, nah, we don't need him. Just our captain for a decade plus. He's not welcome back. We're not going to consider talking to him about a contract. It just baffles me. Almost every Chuck Fletcher decision has baffled me. And they haven't all been bad. Some of them have been okay. But they've all just been baffling.
Well, and you brought up some contracts that he signed recently.
Yeah.
They made this, they talked about getting younger, right? And I kind of went through, I'm going to have to pull up the article really quick because I went through all of them. Or a bunch of them anyway, because I threw ages in. I was talking about how,
and the thing is, it doesn't look like he's getting fired anytime soon, at least at the current moment. We might have a lot of time to do this. We might have a lot of time to break down the Chuck Fletcher era.
So he expresses a desire to get younger, right?
Yep.
And listen, getting younger can certainly be a method for rebuilding. You do addition by subtraction to start with, right? You subtract players.
You got to tear it down before you can build it back. Yep.
And listen, one of the things that Chuck Fletcher said on Tuesday, it's he tries to pin it's just terminology, blah blah. Like to an extent, it is. No one's trying to sit here and tell you that a true rebuild is one way or the highway in terms of tearing it down to the studs. I've said that all along.
Sure, fair enough.
I'm not sitting here telling you have to trade Owen Tippett and you have to trade Cam York and you have to trade Carter
Cam
Hart.
York's not in your window,
right? You have to do it today because because they could and because they are NHL players and they can be part of a solution. So you don't have to trade all of them. You got to ice an NHL roster at some point,
right?
Okay, so I get that, but. Last trade deadline, you could have had instead of having whatever, and look, they had Claude Giroux. I'm not saying that they didn't have him to trade, but you could have had Rasmus Ristolainen at that time with a chance to take the draft picks you traded to get him and recoup a few. You had a way to get some back easily, and instead you re-signed him to a 5-year deal. He's 28 years old, so let's do the math. Okay, we'll chop 1 year off of that because 1 year of that contract's pretty much in the books. So that's going to take him to 32. That getting younger?
No, that's not really a great way to get younger. That doesn't achieve that goal.
Okay, that's fine. How about trading 3 draft picks for 27-year-old Tony DeAngelo? Was that getting younger per se?
No.
Okay,
it wasn't.
How about
and then extending him? Also, no.
Well, extending him for only 2 years is not as bad if he's 27.
Fair.
That's still in a certain window, but. Trading 3 draft picks does not help you get younger. How about signing 32-year-old Nick Delorier to a 4-year deal?
No, that doesn't do it either. Absolutely not.
So, again, it's part of what you've done to yourself. You want to get younger, but nobody wants what you have to get younger. Oh, by the way, that contract for Delorier at 4 years while he's 32 has a no movement clause in it too. Don't forget. So why you gave a no movement clause to a 32-year-old player who is, a role player
at best?
Like,
does Nick Delorier make? He certainly doesn't make the New York Rangers.
But here's the thing: he doesn't make bad money. Like, I'm not trying to.
No. It's not a terrible deal.
Right, I'm not trying to sit here and say a $1.75 million contract is bad. That's not bad, but 4 years and no movement.
It's the message of 4 years on a bottom 6 guy.
Right. That's the criticism. And again, that's not manufactured. The deal is out there. Go look at it. Go look at what's on paper here about what they've done in terms of these contracts. You know what else is bad? And he's young. This is a guy who is younger. This is a guy who very much could fit in that bill of you don't have to tear it down to the studs kind of stuff. Right. Travis Sanheim. Travis Sanheim is fine as a player right now. You can see what you got, and you can see if he's part of this process or not. But here is the thing about this. You rushed to get an 8-year extension done when he would have easily been your most valuable trade chip this year.
Oh,
easily.
Yeah. You could have gotten Jacob Chikrin type return for him.
Maybe not quite as much, but he's in that category. He's in that category.
He probably drives the price up on Chikrin and probably makes the market more competitive.
Yeah. That's not a problem.
Which drives your price up too.
Let's really quick, because I know we got to wrap up pretty soon.
Yeah.
So let's really quick go into this, by the way, and this is not about the game, but what I want to do is because this is part of what I was just talking about with acceptance, right?
And by the way, we will do a little bit more of a trade deadline winners and losers on next week's show. We will be back for next week. But yes. Okay.
All right. First of all, what happened with that game? I can't say I didn't warn you.
And for people that aren't watching on our YouTube channel, we do have a banner up there. Subscribe to our YouTube channel, by the way. Banner is Rangers fans invade Philly. If you watched that game, that was So Kevin, on TV it was pretty loud. Let's go Rangers chants right away.
I took a video that I put on Twitter too, by the way.
Was it more than 50% Rangers fans? Because it was at minimum.
I would say so. I would say so. I have a number that I wrote down that's part of it. Okay. So I knew this was coming. I wasn't surprised about it in the slightest.
Nobody was.
This is also a main, like I said, this is a main part of the acceptance thing I was talking about because this is where you are at today. The Rangers are making the playoffs. Yeah. The Rangers acquired Vladimir Tarasenko and Patrick Kane at the deadline. And while we won't know for a few more weeks whether or not that worked in terms of them being a top tier playoff contender and how far they go and what they're, but they've made their push. So naturally, in the week, what has it been? A week and a half since Tarasenko, and at that time, it was the day after Patrick Kane.
No, it's been it was like 2 weeks since Tarasenko. They did Tarasenko a couple.
Okay, but at the time, so Wednesday it was about a week. It was about a week and a half ish or whatever, week and a half, 2 weeks, and Kane was the day before.
Right.
So naturally, Rangers fans are excited. They want to
as well. They should be. Yep.
So, I don't want to slap a majority on this, but a large contingent of Flyers fans don't want to see this team right now. So a majority of the tickets went to the opposition. Simple as that. But
and
if
it's probably cheaper for most New Yorkers.
Right. But if you're supposed to be playing for pride when putting the jersey on as a player, then I'd love to be in the heads of the guys that we were talking about, the Bobby Clarks and Paul Holmgrens and Bill Barbers, who played for the franchise, who defined who defined Flyers hockey in their playing days, who were winners in this organization. How do you feel about this?
How does that not embarrass you?
How do you feel about the sight of a building that is pretty close to sold out in terms of full capacity and housing what I would guess would be 70%, 75% Ranger fans?
It was that high, really?
Oh, I feel like it.
Wow.
It's very much something that many people never thought they would see.
So,
and the funny part is, the interesting thing to me was on this night, I just talked about John Tortorella and what he said yesterday, and how I sorry, Torts, it's not manufactured, it's not piling on. You can sit there and say that, but it's not.
It's bad.
On this particular night, John Tortorella may have had his best quote of the season, and I'll read you what he said.
Okay.
We make our own bed. We need to get this in the right direction, where maybe someday those tickets are hard to come by. Don't blame anyone else. Blame us. This is what we made here. Hopefully along the way, we get this turned around. I'm not sure when, but get it back to where that's a tough ticket. And maybe Rangers fans just aren't allowed in the building because we filled it with our people. Not there yet, obviously. And I'm not blaming the fans. I'm not blaming anybody else except us and the organization. We make our own bed and where we're at, and it's up to us to get out of it.
I think John Tortorella likes being in Philadelphia because if he didn't, he wouldn't be fighting this hard. I think he is the face. I think he is the face of accountability and being honest with the fans, and here's what we are.
But maybe
I respect this out of Torts.
Sure, but maybe the best thing he said all season long, and he's had some good ones. Now, of course, some of the juice from this is a little bit lost Saturday when, we're talking with the criticism on Chuck Fletcher and it being legitimate and not manufactured. But this particular quote is spot on. And this is what happens when you have such a rudderless franchise and face an opponent in close enough proximity to your arena that they can scoop up tickets and take over a building. They're a very good team right now. And listen, to the Flyers' credit, that particular night, by the way, and this is really the only in-game analysis we've got for this week's show. For roughly 50 minutes of that game, they kept the Rangers fans sitting on their hands all night. They played a good, hard-fought game. It was loud 2 or 3 minutes into the game. The Flyers got it tied. They took the lead. They held the lead for half the third period, and they didn't have a thing that they could cheer about until they finally got that game tied. Once they did, they were back, and they were loud, and they were vocal. But that's where this was. And this is it's a perfect way to wrap the show, because this is what I mean by acceptance. You can accept that this is where you are with a building full of people that are not for your team. You can accept that this is where you are in terms of what the league thinks of you in terms of respect. You can accept that this is where you are with your franchise, and that everybody who's supposed to be advising on where it's going is advising, saying it's fine, it's good. It's the burning building with the dog sitting inside sipping his coffee going, hey, you know what? We're okay. Everything's fine. You can accept that, and if you do, good luck building it back, because people are as fed up as I've seen them at any point, and it's not going away. I'm going to tell you that now.
Things are
really
right
not
now.
Going away.
Yep. I think it's going to be an ugly
and I'll tell
rest
you
of
what,
the season.
And I'll tell you what. This is what we'll lead into next week's show with. I'll be there tonight when they play the Detroit Red Wings and this is the last home game they're going to have for a little while, by the way. But I'll be there tonight. It's the first game that they play as a team, the first home game after the trade deadline passes.
How do they bounce back?
Let's see how the building looks this time. And let's see, for whoever is in the building, let's see what kind of stuff we end up hearing. We'll see. And I'll be curious, and that might be where we start next week's show.
And we have 4 games between now and our next show. We'll be back next Sunday. It's 4 teams that added at the deadline that are trying to get better, make the playoffs. Some of the teams
3 out of 4 for sure. Detroit kind of
they technically added.
Yzerman said he wasn't going to add under any circumstances, so which is interesting.
They're still a solid team. They're
a good team. No, they're still a good team, and very much if they want to make the playoffs, and this game's important.
Fine. The Flyers are playing 4 teams that are definitely better than they are, and we will be back next week to talk about it. In the meantime, follow us on Twitter at YWT Podcast. Follow follow Kevin at Kevin_Durso. Subscribe to our YouTube channel. Find the show anywhere you find your podcasts, including Facebook, Instagram, Podbean, iTunes, Google Podcasts, Spotify, SportsTalkPhilly.com. And on that note, I think we're done here, Kevin. So.
Well, real quick plug, if I may, because
absolutely,
I'm following this one up with another appearance on O&B this week.
Okay,
so we're recording that on Monday night.
All right. So if you listen to us and don't listen to O&B, go check them out too.
No, please listen to both, because O&B has been great, and they've been good. They've been really good to us too, by the way.
Yeah, I said if you listen to us and you don't listen to them, make sure to go listen to them.
Oh yes, sure.
Yeah.
Okay, I was making sure that, because they've been great to us. And,
absolutely.
And it's funny because I made a joke about this when they were trying to get me to come on the show, that it seems like they wheel me out right around the time of the Fletcher pressers, because it's always the quarter marks. I did preseason. I did the last week before the season started. I did the quarter mark. I did the halfway point, and now I'm doing the post deadline show.
Nice.
So I guess I got to complete the whole gauntlet here, and I guess I got to do the first show that they have after the season's up too.
Fair enough. All right, check them out. Come back next week. Subscribe to our YouTube channel. We'll see ya.